Hello everybody. I changed some of my settings on this live stream stuff, so I don't know whether it'll be better or worse than it was before, but tried to get rid of some of that lag that I had on the stream in times past, but gonna wait. I think Human is doing a stream tonight as well, and I kind of already planned on jumping on here for maybe an hour and a half, so some people might be watching his stuff instead, but that's cool. My channel is not much of anything compared to his, so I'm pretty sure that that's not going to affect him much. See, it says a couple of people are watching. If anybody watching can comment on the audio and see whether it sounds alright, that would be appreciated. If not, I'll probably go ahead anyhow. So I hope everyone's doing alright. Oh, Mr. Yamabito says, hello, Ohio. Inventions on here. It says, greeting from Mexico, brother. Hope things are going well for you, Vention. I know that you're really waiting until things improve weather-wise before you even consider coming back, but so the audio sounds good. That's good. Basically, I just had a few things on my mind, and I haven't made a video since the end of last year. So I wanted to go ahead and just kind of talk about and ramble about a few things like I have in the past. I guess the first thing that I want to mention is that, watching a lot of the stuff that's gone on since, well, not just since the election, but especially since the actual process of Biden becoming president. I've noticed that the media has just become so, and it's already been this way, but so rabidly against anything other than the general Marxist leftist ideology. It's just, over the last several years, really since the whole Trump controversy became a thing in politics, I've noticed that it's just gotten worse and worse. And now that they've actually won, they've won both houses in Congress, the Democratic Party, and they have the presidency, and who knows how long it'll be where Biden's president until Harris actually becomes the president. Maybe, some people will say, well, that's going to happen really quickly. It may not even happen at all. They may be able to use Biden as a puppet for 4 years and he just doesn't run for re-election or something like that. Even with that, things are going to get far worse during that time period. And the man with no name, CL, says, hello, Brother Dan. How are you doing, CL? I hope you're not freezing to death wherever you're at right now. It's, the weather's not been great. But the thing about it is, the media has just divided people so much. And I mentioned this in the last live stream, I think. Well, I'm pretty sure that I did. That people are getting pushed into one camp or the other. They're either getting pushed into the, I'm going to listen to Trump and believe what he says more or less, or whatever's coming out of his camp, or I just believe everything that the media tells me because I'm a leftist to begin with. Or you have the people that are just dumb and they become essentially leftist because they believe what the media tells them. And I think that as time has gone along, even just over the past couple of months, like I say, between the election and now with the inauguration having taken place, I've just noticed that the media has just become so radicalized in terms of, even compared to where it's been before, up until this point, it has just become such a propaganda machine to social justice, dividing people into groups based on race and gender and other factors that go along with that. It has just become such a force of bias and non-objective thinking that there is just, and again, I realize it's been this way for a long time. That's probably what a lot of people will say to this. Well, it's been that way forever, Dan. But the thing about it is, it's at such a point that it's almost impossible for people who are not just completely stupid and in the dark to ignore. And I think people are going to actually have a choice to make where they just leave the mainstream media sort of sphere of influence, that they just stop listening to all the propaganda, and they come to realize a lot more of what's been going on in terms of, well, this doesn't add up, this doesn't make sense. Why am I hearing about how, there are all these people, and this is just here's a very simple example. When BLM destroys cities, that's a peaceful protest by and large, supposedly. But when a few crazy people converge on the Capitol and enter the building and really don't do a whole lot of anything in terms of damage and hurting people, other than I think one person did have to get killed or was shot by the police, but I don't know that any people that weren't Trump supporters or protesting that were actually hurt or killed. Maybe some of them were, I don't know, but like the actual security and stuff. But the thing about it is, that's an insurrection. Just hearing that is so laughable. It's like, if you study history at all, an insurrection is not what happened in Washington, D.C. a couple weeks ago during the inauguration. An insurrection is you are besieged by people that want to actually take you out of power and potentially have the means to do so. That's an actual insurrection. But at the same time, you hear that that's what that is. And yet, when the other side actually uses violence and actually takes over parts of different cities, like in Seattle or Portland, that's peaceful protesting. I mean, it's just, people, I think, are going to be forced to either just lobotomize themselves and just believe whatever the media tells them, or they're going to have to be kind of, I think, maybe not quite forced, but they are going to have to recognize that the media is constantly lying to them. Like, I don't see how there's another option here where you're trying to, like, technically you could still sit here and say, well, I agree with this, but I don't believe that and whatnot. You could still do that. But I think we're getting to a point now where there has to be a general understanding of, is the media even trying to engage in journalism anymore? Are they even trying to pretend that they're not part of the radical left anymore? And I think that people are going to have to, at least to some extent, wake up. Like, I'm not saying that people will abandon their ideology, but they're going to have to wake up, like, to really understand, or even come close to understanding what they're seeing now. Like, it just doesn't make sense. If you're someone that is oblivious initially to what's going on politically, but you just mind your own business and you're pretty much apathetic to politics, and you start off believing what the media tells you in general, and then you turn on the news and see the bullcrap that they talk about, and how Trump is to blame for everything, and we can just go into this huge amount of debt, but we have to because the virus is so bad that it kills 2% of the people that it infects. I mean, if you're a thinking person, none of that makes sense. None of what the media tells you makes sense, other than as propaganda for one side of the political sphere. And I think that, we're at a point now, I think we're at a crossroads where a lot of people are going to they're going to stay asleep and they're never going to wake up, because they're just going to believe whatever they're told because they are incapable of thinking for themselves, or they're going to have to look at what the media tells them and say, wait a second, I may not be a conservative, I may not be on the right politically or whatever. I may be a center-left libertarian, or I may be someone that is indifferent to politics, like I said, to begin with, or whatever the case may be. You may be anywhere on the political spectrum aside from the radical left, and then you even just look at what's being said, and it's like, well, that doesn't make sense. There's no way that that's an insurrection. I know what an insurrection is from understanding history class. An insurrection is we actually try to overthrow the government or besiege a city or take over certain areas. That was never the intention of the people that protested on Washington. That was never the intention. And so I think a lot of people, if they have the capability of thinking for themselves, even technically the radical leftists have to look at this and say, yeah, you're telling people what I want you to tell you, but you're not engaging in journalism. I think even some of them have to know that there is no attempt at news reporting in an objective sense anymore. And it just amazes me how people will stay asleep and not really get it. But I think we're at that crossroads now where this is kind of the last chance for people to realize that the media just lies to them on an everyday basis. They're either going to become leftists by believing what the media tells them, or they're going to wake up and say, you know what, I don't like Trump or I don't agree with Trump, but this is ridiculous. Why are they impeaching somebody that's no longer in office? Why is the media acting like that's the right thing to do? Why is one thing an insurrection where another thing is a peaceful protest, when the peaceful protest, if you're doing your own analysis, you're looking up information at all, the peaceful protest was worse than the so-called insurrection. It just doesn't make any sense. Let me catch up with some of the comments here before I get way too far behind. I think I kind of already am. Vincent says, yeah, why should I come back to a cold state that's locked down? Is our state still locked down? I don't know what's going on in that part of the country. I know... I don't know what some of the sort of requirements you're going to have when you come back into the country would be, Vincent. I imagine you'll have to do a COVID test and all that kind of stuff. I know in Ohio there's still supposedly a curfew, but it's been pushed back to 11 o'clock, and it's so dumb. It's so stupid. It's like, why is the coronavirus going to be worse at night? The coronavirus is not some sort of vampiric disease that can only infect people at night. It just makes no sense. So, really, in Ohio, the worst thing we have to do is wear a mask everywhere, and there's this sort of soft curfew, but it's really not that bad right now, aside from being completely dumb, completely without any sort of reason. Mr. Yamabita says the media is just a circle jerk. Yep, pretty much. He also says the Democrats haven't won. Well, I think they're in the process of getting exactly what they want. I mean, they do have control of both houses and the presidency now, so things don't look good, but, I don't really have faith in the Republicans to do anything anyway, to be honest, in many cases. I'm not saying Democrats and Republicans are the same, but one is just a worse version of the other, in my opinion, at this point, in some ways at least. Mr. Yamabito also says, Ohio, it's not like today. The reality is that it's so transparent because the internet in its nature contradicts what they do, because if you look hard enough, the truth is out there. That's right. I agree with that. I think it was Goldberg, Martin Goldberg, he used to call his channel Economic Invincibility. He was talking about that at one point, where he said, it's not so much that the media necessarily, and this was before all the election fiasco, so I do think things have gotten worse since then, but he said it's not necessarily that the truth is something that the media all of a sudden has not been reporting. Like, it's not that all of a sudden the media started lying to people. It's just that people have more resources. They can actually look to see what the truth is through the internet, and your legacy media outlets can only hide so much. But it's just, I think, since this election, and one other thing I want to mention quickly, with the whole Twitter ban on Trump, you know, I'm not someone that is an expert with social media. I don't have Twitter. I kind of don't see the point in Twitter to a large extent. I do have Facebook, but I just use that to basically talk to a few friends and family members that are still part of my life. You know, part of who I like to talk to every now and then, aside from, you know, on YouTube. But I think that Twitter, you know, being part of the propaganda machine, being, you know, in the control of the leftists, them banning Trump was actually a smart thing for them. Because it's almost like a spoils of war type of scenario where not only has Trump been defeated, and I think that's what the impeachment stuff that we see now is really about. There's no other rationale for trying to impeach someone that's no longer in office. It's stupid. But it's more like a spoils of war thing. It's kind of like, you know, the whole World War One. Almost said World War II, but it was World War One, where after the Treaty of Versailles, I think it might have been Paris. I can't remember. I get those confused. They basically had all these payments that the Germans had to make. All of these. There's a word for it, and I can't think of what it is. But all these tributes, all these payments that they had to make for supposedly being at fault with the war. You know, and it made things worse, of course. And I'm not saying that part of it's going to happen here, where you're going to have another conflict necessarily right after that or within a few decades. That, you know, that could push people that far, I guess. But that's not really what I think is going to happen. The thing about it is, though, when you win the war, you win the conflict, a lot of the time you put the terms out there that you force the other side to agree with. And since I think this is the way the leftists are thinking, is that since they have the House, they have the presidency, they have the Senate, they're just going to do whatever the hell they want. And so it's going to get worse. And that's really what I think emboldened Twitter to ban Trump. If they had banned Trump during his presidency, Trump would have still had that base that would have been really super pissed off, way more than it is now, I think. And, you know, to ban the sitting president from using social media while everybody else can, that would have probably been the wrong move. It would have made people more pissed off than what they needed to make people actually, you know, they didn't need to do that. All they had to do was wait till Trump lost, ban him, and prevent Trump from having a base ever again. I think that's really the motivation for why Twitter did that. They don't care whether Trump had anything to do with the so-called insurrection of people protesting on the Capitol. The problem is, or the issue is, they don't want Trump to ever have a chance to rise to power in any form again. That's their goal. And they take away part of his platform by banning him from Twitter. I think that if someone tries to emulate what Trump did, which I don't know that they could be successful anyway, but if somebody else tries to rally grassroots conservative right-wing people as, you know, the kind of building block to creating a political movement or toward running for the presidency again, I think if somebody else tries to do that, you'll see a much quicker hook. Twitter will say, oh, you can't say that, that's racist, and they'll just ban them, so that they have no opportunity to get off the ground. I think that's a lot of the strategy that you're going to see at this point in the future, is if there's any resistance to the radical left, you're going to see social media used, I think, in a lot more of an aggressive way against that person, because they don't like how Trump managed to use Twitter successfully, you know, for as long as he was actually in office at least. They're going to try to do away with that. Anybody else that tries to follow those footsteps or do something similar with, you know, the kind of grassroots effort on the right, even if you can possibly do that, which you could argue, I would say, is not going to happen anyway. The right has been thoroughly defeated. But they're basically just going to go ahead and ban them. I think that that's something that would happen if somebody tries to do something similar as to what Trump did. Let's see. CL says more like misdirection. Yeah, that's what a lot of it is in terms of all the stuff that we see the media claiming about the right and all the left is different. It's all BS. Let's see. I'm not going to read every comment here just so I can kind of continue to talk. Mr. Yamabito says, all a guy needs to understand is the concept of hyper-real. From John. Don't know how to pronounce that last name. Baudrillard? It's all smoke and mirrors. Yeah, I'm not too familiar with that. I might check that out. He also says, too much information that the truth isn't as important as the message. Yeah, I guess. I think a lot of people know that the media is being intellectually dishonest, and they just don't care because it agrees with especially on the left, it just agrees with what they want. But I think more and more people are at least figuring out that it doesn't add up. More and more people are looking at this and saying, wait a second, how is Trump to blame for this? How does that make sense? And why is it that we have these vaccines coming out and wearing a mask is supposed to be effective against this virus? Why is it just as bad now as it's ever been? Why does that make sense? I'm not saying you can't try to formulate a response to that, but the media doesn't try. And you can look at the claims of election fraud in this. It's all just a hoax. It's all just a conspiracy theory. It's like, okay, if you're not going to even be able to answer that, then you're not engaging in journalism. You're just engaging in propaganda. And I think more and more people are realizing that at this point. And there are more and more people that are going into a deeper and deeper sleep too. I just think that's the crossroads where we're at. Your people are just going to either stay completely asleep, or they're going to, even if they don't necessarily have a political awakening to what's going on and how the left has adopted this Marxist way of thinking, they may not wake up to that, but they're going to see that the media is full of crap. And it's interesting because the media is pushing so hard now, more than I've ever seen them do, even in the Obama administration and everything, to indoctrinate people that I think they're honestly probably pushing too hard, even for their own interests, because some people are going to look at this and say, that doesn't make any sense. Why should I believe that this is actual journalism? This is just blatant propaganda. And then you also have, a lot of they're really trying to push the whole transsexual thing more. It's like every story they do on that is like, this person's brave for coming out as a woman when they're really a man. And people are going to look at that. And like I say, your everyday people who are blue-pilled as fuck when it comes to a lot of different things, they're going to look at this and say, that's not normal. That's not right. Like, that doesn't make sense. Even if you think transgender people should be allowed to do this and have no problem with people making decisions for themselves, why is this person brave by acting like they're a woman when they have a Y chromosome? People are going to look at that and realize that they're being fed propaganda, that there's no journalism and no sort of objective thinking or objective presentation there, I think. Maybe that's too optimistic to think people will wake up to that. I don't know. But like I say, I think people are going to split into one category or the other. They're either going to fall more asleep and they're never going to wake up out of their coma, or they're going to be forced to wake up because it just doesn't add up to them. Vincent says, I'm embarrassed to say that my dad is a believer in CNN and Rachel Maddow is a favorite of his. I've been able to red pill him a bit, but he's a stubborn guy. Yeah. You seem to have that, there's just that class of people, and older people especially, they aren't necessarily very good with technology, and I don't know whether that describes your dad or anything, but they don't do their own research, and they really don't know how, so they just believe whatever the TV tells them. To be fair, from what I've noticed, even within my own kind of family and circle of people, you have a lot of older boomers who all they do is sit around and watch Fox News. and they're kind of being forced to look up other sources for information now, because there no longer is any mainstream conservative source, because Fox News has been bought by Disney. I really have just given it all up over the last several years. I think they're all so full of crap, and they're all trying to sell their ideology, that even when Fox News was more to the right, they really weren't much better than everybody else, in my opinion. But yeah, you have these people who just, all they want to do is sit there and watch TV, and they don't think for themselves, and so they become de facto leftists. I think you said that your dad was a socialist anyway, so they're going to tend to be drawn toward those kinds of things, because it says what they want to hear. But a lot of it, I think, is also just, it's easier to just believe what you hear. And it's only when it reaches that point where it just doesn't make sense. You can't even pretend. You can't even hold a straight face to some of the stuff that they say. Oh, but Biden is going to, make things better. Biden has been the swamp. Biden is part of the swamp. It's so easy to show that if you think Trump is a bad guy because of a lot of his dealings, look at Biden and his son in Ukraine, and look at what Biden has done in terms of being just a weird, potentially perverted person. It's just, if you're going to hate Trump because he's mean to women, or he does weird stuff, and he thinks that he's basically too good for us, or whatever the case may be, how is Biden any better than that? Biden has been screwing people over in D.C. his whole life. But, the media doesn't present it that way. So it takes people waking up, at least to some extent, I think, in order to realize, wait a second, this doesn't make sense. And half the stuff that Biden says, it comes out of his mouth, and there's no connection between the words. There's no syntax. It doesn't make any sense. But yet we're supposed to believe that Biden is going to be a mentally competent president. People are going to look at this and say, that's stupid. Like, they're going to, I think more people, again, maybe this is too optimistic, but I think they're going to have to accept at some level that they're being lied to about a lot of these things. CL says, CL, I assume you don't care if I should say the man with no name, but I know you from the channel from a long time ago. Talking about how an elite cabal has been working behind the scenes to guide the direction, not even hiding it now. Yeah, I mean, it just seems that way. It's like they are so blatant in their propaganda that if more people don't wake up to this, that's sad. It really is. Like, we're even worse off than what I thought we were. I hate to be that negative about it, but it's just kind of the way I see it. Mr. Yamabito says, I am not for the left or right. They are all in a collusion to direct their agenda, make citizenry that is submissive and obedient. I agree with that to an extent. The thing is, the Republican Party really doesn't represent the right anymore. The Republican Party is kind of the center-left party, in my opinion, or at best just kind of the centrist party. I want to make a point on that, though, and this may not be directly related to what you said, Mr. Yamabito, but I think a lot of people say that we're moving toward a one-party state. That may be the case in the short run, like, maybe for the next 2 years or 4 years while the Democrats still have control over both houses. But I think what is more likely to happen is that the Republican Party will just keep moving further toward the left. The Republican Party has just become sort of controlled resistance. They've become just part of, like you say, they're part of the problem now. I don't think they really represent the right, though. I think a lot of people on the right voted for Trump to begin with because they felt disenfranchised by this current system. Because nobody really supports conservatism or people on the the right-wing kind of policies anymore. It's just basically far left and center left. I think the Republican Party will continue to move toward that center left position because that's the only way they're going to get elected now, at a national scale, right? On a national scale, that's the only way, because the left basically has cultivated their values, their Marxist values, to the point where the majority of people are kind of in that camp now, unfortunately. People just want free stuff, in other words. People just want the government to give them things and to basically win the sort of diversity lottery, and just basically it's a divide and conquer thing. And I think the Republican Party may survive, but they're going to survive as another leftist party at this point. But I understand what you're saying, Mr. Yamabito, not for the left or the right. I think that there are some people who are conservative in politics, people on the right who are in politics, but they have no power anymore. And CL also says there really is no right anymore. Yeah, you're right. There's not. There are people that have those points of view, I think, but they're disenfranchised more or less at this point. Man, I've got a lot of comments on here. I keep rambling on for too long. Let's see here. CL says, same people behind both protests. Don't kid yourself. Well, I think to some extent that's true. I'm sure that there was some Antifa / leftist. I'm not sure, but I would imagine that there were some elements of that, even in D.C. I think a lot of the people, though, that went to that were just useful idiots. I think the media knew that they were going to portray it as some sort of insurrection no matter what happened. And then these people that, ran into the Capitol building or whatever they did, they were kind of just a tool to say, oh, look at these bad people. See, Trump supporters are violent. They're all bad. I think that was a big part of it, too. I don't think those people were necessarily the same. I think those were just useful idiots that loved Trump and thought that somehow he was going to still stay in office. Like, I don't want to get into that too much, but a lot of people just thought that somehow he would remain president. And it's just like, I kind of figured there was no way that was going to happen, but had to kind of wait to see how it all unfolded for people to realize that, I guess. Not that I know it all. I mean, it's just, I didn't see how that was going to be the case, that he was going to stay in office somehow. Blue Vision says, here in LA, we're dead. Newsom might run for 2024. Yeah, I'm sorry, Blue Vision, that you live in California. We might see a Harris-Newsom presidency in 2024. Well, I don't think so. The president and the vice president have to be from a different state. If Harris is still a resident of California, you can't have the president and vice president be from the same state. They would have to have residency somewhere else. One of them would. That's an interesting, weird thing that for whatever reason I know, but I don't think they want to put two California people on the ticket anyhow. They probably want someone from the East Coast, maybe, like Biden, for example. But, it doesn't matter. I really think things look bleak, and it's sad, but I don't see how things can be put on the right track anymore. Like I say, it's not impossible that Republicans will gain the presidency again, but I hope y'all realize, or at least evaluate what that means if it happens years from now. Because the reality is that it's not going to matter if the Republican Party is just another leftist party. Whether they survive or not, they're a pitiful form of what they used to be. Kind of like this country, in terms of politics and our culture, at least. Let's see, Eric Bullis says, I might get banned for this. Google Mouse Utopia Socialism Experiment of the 1930s. Be smart enough to figure it out what socialism really is, the rat race, you are mammals, conducted by Democrats. See, Blue Vision says, I'm sure that's right. I've kind of heard comments to that nature before, but people are they're just dumb. You know, they don't care about socialism. They just want the government. You cultivate this for decades, or maybe even for a century or more, and you eventually get people to buy into this thing that, you know, well, you deserve free stuff from the government and this other person doesn't because of your race and your gender or whatever it is. It used to be socioeconomic class, but now it's more the cultural variety of that. And you engender or indoctrinate people with that for years, for decades, and this is what you get. So, yeah, I mean, human nature can be manipulated very easily, unfortunately, in my opinion. Blue Vision says social media is a branch of government. They don't want Trump to run for 2024. That's right. That's a big part of what we, like I mentioned with the Twitter ban. Honestly, I think Trump is too old to run in 2024, in my opinion. But it doesn't even matter. It's too late. You know, you know, maybe when that time comes around, we won't think that way. Maybe I'm being too negative about it, but I just don't think that it matters whether Trump will not become president again. I think it's almost impossible. Because so many of his people are demoralized, and the way everything went down, where people thought he was going to stay in office, and Trump really challenged it and kind of gave it his, whether you agree with how he did it or not, and a lot of people probably don't, and I can understand why. You know, it's just, what was he really going to do to fight the results of the election? So I don't think Trump would make that much headway in 2024. I think he would be better off trying to find somebody who would be kind of the heir of what he was trying to accomplish. But what's the point, honestly? In my opinion, they're not going to be successful anyway. So Vincent says if they impeach him, supposedly he can't come back in 4 years. Yeah, that might be what they want. You know, they want to impeach him so that he can't be president again. Like I say, it's a spoils of war type of thing. It's, we won, and we're not satisfied with defeating you in an election. We want to utterly destroy you so that you have no ability to, in any way, reestablish yourself politically. That's what this is, to a large extent. Mr. Yamabito, not to get too personal, what town or city are you closest to in Ohio? I have family over there. Ohio is a big state, but I'd rather not answer that. Like, I'm not offended by that, but you never know. People could figure out exactly where I am and decide that they're going to put my channel down. Monk Farmer says reparations. Yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to think of earlier. Spoils of war or reparations. Yeah, that's what a lot of this basically is, I think, between the Democrats and Republicans, or not the Democrats and Republicans, but what the Democrats and the media and everything are doing now that Trump has lost. It's a form of revenge. It's a form of making them pay for trying to defy the leftist agenda. Mr. Yamabito says they won't impeach Trump. He will be back in 4 years. I don't think so, Mr. Yamabito. I don't think that will happen. Not only is his age going to be a lot more of a factor, but one of the things, I don't want to go off too much on a tangent, but one of the things that led to Trump being defeated this time, in my opinion, there are several things that go into it. The biggest one is probably that he didn't go up against Hillary, and so Trump didn't have the support of the people that hated Hillary Clinton, necessarily. But a lot of people were just sick of it. They were sick of having to watch every day on TV about how Trump was saying this and other people said that. They just wanted the whole political situation with Trump in office to go away. They didn't care whether the media caused most of it. Some of them knew that the media caused most of it. one of my family members that I'm pretty sure voted for Trump both times, both elections, basically said, well, at least they're done with it. At least this is all going to go away and we're not going to have all this dramatic bullshit every time we see the news. And yet it's just getting worse, isn't it? You know, that's kind of the point of what I've been saying in this video, is that no, it's not going away. Now that they have power, they are just amping up. You know, they have basically near complete power with the federal level of government now. You know, they already had everything that you would consider part of the deep state on their side, but now the left also has all of the direct, legitimate political power, or not legitimate necessarily, but, you know, they have the House and the Senate and the presidency. They're just going to get worse. It's just going to be, you're a bad person if you don't apologize for being white. You know, we need more feminism. We need more division based on, well, this is who you are, so you're bad. How dare you support Trump because Trump is evil? You're just going to see more and more and more of this as time goes along. Like, you can go from issue to issue, and if you don't agree with the radical left position, the media is going to tell you that you're a terrible person. This is just the way it's going to be now. And this is what people asked for by thinking that by voting for Biden and Harris, that this would improve somehow. That's not the way that it works. When you give them more power, and I think that is the main reason, of course, why we see the media being so much more rabid. It's just, you're bad now because we have all the power, and fuck you. You know, you were stupid enough to not go out and vote for Trump. Not that in the long run I think that would have been much of a solution anyway. But now you see that it's not going to get better. And your taxes are going to go up, and you're going to be blamed as, you know, the sort of scourge of society because of who you are now, if you don't fit into one of the so-called victim groups that we want to use to take your rights away. I mean, you're going to see challenges to due process and to free speech. More things are going to be labeled as hate speech if you're part of the oppressor class. Congratulations, you know, this is what you wanted by voting for Biden and Harris, so that you thought this would go away. Sorry, I went on a real rant there, but that's something that I've seen, is that I find personally frustrating, when they think things are going to get better because Trump's out of office. No, Trump was just a stopgap for all of this kind of stuff going through and becoming worse. Vincent says, I just have Twitter so I can use the Tippin' Me website. That allows me to accept Bitcoin tips from fellow Bitcoiners. Yeah, that would be the way to do something like that, because you're not actually saying anything and you're not putting anything out there. It's just to your benefit. That would be the only reason to use something like Twitter that I could think of, honestly. Blue Vision says, we're going to see massive inflation 2021 to 2024. Yeah, we're probably going to see massive inflation just this year. And I'm sure that Vincent and some of the other people that are more astute with financial topics would know more about that and say more about that. But really, it's just common sense at this point. You can't print all this money and add all this massive debt to the system by saying, oh, we have to do something because of this virus. It's destroying everything. It's destroying our economy. We must print more money. And then think that within a year or two, you're not going to have huge inflation. You know, what do you think the value of a dollar is when they're just trying to put this, you know, just inject all this currency into the system so that people don't revolt, basically, so that people aren't like, hey, you've destroyed our business and everything. Well, the government will bribe you so that, you know, you stay at home and remain a good citizen. I hate to be so cynical about it, but that's kind of what's going on. Of course there's going to be massive inflation. But sadly, a lot of people don't see it. They think that somehow the government can print all this money, give all these stimulus checks, and that the value of the dollar is not going to decrease. It defies common sense after a certain point, I think. But a lot of people don't seem to realize it, I guess. Mr. Yamabita says, I have no proof, but I believe he will be back. I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it's just going to get worse in terms of, again, what platform would Trump use? The Republicans are sick of him. Twitter has banned him. He couldn't beat a senile old man in this election. And you could argue that there was fraud and try, some people say, well, Biden really won, or I'm sorry, Biden really lost to Trump. I don't see enough evidence for that personally. But no, Trump's not going to be back. My advice is, if you still want to be sort of politically active, if you think that the system is still worth, and I'm not saying you do think this, but if you still think it's worth trying to support somebody over the leftist machine, I would find somebody else. I would look for someone who's younger. I don't know who it would be, but that's what it's going to take. There's going to have to be some sort of younger version of Trump who comes across a little bit better, but still unites people on the right, the alt-right, the traditional conservatives, and everybody else. I don't know who it would be though, to be honest. But somebody will probably step up and try to do what Trump did. But I don't think they'll be successful, and I don't think Trump can do it again. He's just too old, for one thing, and people are sick of it. They don't want Trump back in office because, again, enough people are dumb enough to think that he's the true source of the problem that we've had for the last 4 years. He's not, of course. It's the leftist machine that's the true source of most of the issues we've had. I'm not saying Trump was a great president either, but he was a stopgap or a sort of, what's the right word to use? He was a desperate attempt to reverse course. And he was better than what we have now, but I don't really think that he will be successful at becoming the Republican nominee. The best that he could do is maybe run as an independent candidate, but all that would do is split the vote so that Democrats won. It would be like, I can't remember the election cycle, but when Teddy Roosevelt ran with the Bull Moose Party and split the Republican vote, and Woodrow Wilson, who was the big government Democrat, won easily. It would be that kind of thing. I don't think that Trump can do that successfully. Monk Farmer says, funny how no one cares anymore with any of this bullshit. Yeah. Yeah. Vention says, oh, he's talking to Blue Vision there about inflation. Yeah, I figured Vention would probably have some information with that. And I've watched his videos. Again, when it comes to this particular topic, it's like, how's inflation not going to be high? You'd have to just completely not understand economics and finance at all to think that there's going to be no ridiculous level of inflation now. And by the way, this is kind of an aside, and I'm going to go back to reading some of these comments because I'm still far behind. But the thing about it is, a lot of what's going on, I think, is, and this is not, I'm not the first one to say this, I'm sure, this is not a novel idea, but the main reason for the stuff that we see with the virus, besides hurting Trump's re-election chances, the reason we see all of this mayhem with the virus is basically because we want to make people financially dependent on the government. That's really what all this is. We break people down, your average people, we break them down, we make it to where their money's not worth anything, and that's going to hurt the wealthy in society, but not nearly as much as it's going to destroy the middle class. That, I think, is really kind of the bigger, sort of deeper picture here. And again, I'm not a financial expert. Vention may tell me that that's not really what it is. I don't know, but that seems to me that's the main effect that we've seen from all this coronavirus stuff. It really kind of annoys me when people say things like 2020 was so bad because of the coronavirus. No, 2020 was so bad because you consented to the government taking away your right to decide what to do with your own health because of the coronavirus. The coronavirus was a means to an end to do that. I'm not saying it doesn't exist at all, and you can argue about how it started and all that. You can argue. I'm not saying we shouldn't take it seriously. I'm not going to sit here and say that there's no issue with corona at all. There, some people who are apparently young and healthy do get it and have problems with it, but the vast majority of healthy people don't, because it's just a bad version of the flu or pneumonia, however you want to think about it. I don't mean that in a literal sense, but that's the level of severity of the disease in general. I know in Ohio, and this, if more people knew this, maybe more people would think about this. The majority of people who have passed away from the coronavirus were in nursing homes. Now, I'm sorry, but that's not a pandemic that's worth shutting things down for. You might shut down the nursing home, and not in a literal sense, but in terms of not allowing visitors. That makes sense. Having protocols for the people that work in the nursing homes and hospitals, I'm not against that at all. But to do what you've done to this economy, that makes absolutely no logical sense whatsoever, other than you wanted to do this, right? You wanted to do this to the economy so that you could crunch the middle class, so that you could increase your ownership, your level of control over the economy, over businesses, through corporations, and through the size and scope of government. By increasing the power of those entities, you increase your personal control and wealth at the expense of everybody else who is losing everything, not because of the virus, like people are saying, but because of what you've allowed the government to do as a response to the virus without saying anything about it, and just blaming it on 2020. That might be the most annoying iteration of that is, we blame 2020 for being so bad on the economy. You're blaming the year itself, which is, an abstract concept, rather than blaming the actual people and policies that have led to this result. That's insane to me that people will do that. But, 2020 was so terrible, I hope 2021's better. Well, I hope you support something better. I hope you have better policies, because otherwise things are just going to get worse. People just, I don't know. I'm not saying I have all the answers to that, exactly what we should do, but it's clear that 2020 in itself should not be to blame. It's the government's reaction and people's reaction to everything that's been happening. And like I say, I think this is just a pretext for crunching the middle class and taking more wealth into the hands of a few. I think that's, you can just, it doesn't take a genius. It's like you can look at that past, the last stimulus or rescue package or whatever you wanted to call it that Trump passed. $600 for a bill that was $900 billion? $600 per person. Really? You're not even going to be able to pay your rent in a month in most cases. But where is the most of that money going? It's going to corporations. It's going to government kickbacks. It's just so obvious that that's where things stand. And Trump even wanted a $2,000 stimulus for people. And they said no, and yet somehow Trump is still the boogeyman because he did things bad throughout this whole pandemic. It makes no sense when you pay attention, in my opinion. Blue Vision says the media just talks about or just cares about talking points, not results. Yep, that's true. What the? Said MSNBC had Emmett Till on at 9 a.m. today. The assault on emotions is demonic. Had a story about Emmett Till. I was going to say Emmett Till can't still be alive. I thought that they brutally killed him back in the 60s or whenever that happened. Toward the start of the civil rights movement, I think. Mr. Yamabito says, Ohio, all these meta-narratives meant to distract citizens from the facts and real evidence, focus on the propaganda and not what they are actually trying to do, divide people and conquer. Yeah, that's their goal. And you can look at it through the lens of Marxism. That's what it is. You divide people based on, well, you're the oppressors and you're the oppressed, based on race, gender, socioeconomic status, and so forth. And I don't want to get into that too much in this video, or at least unless it comes up as another topic. But yeah, that's all they want to do. It's just divide and conquer. Don't pay attention to the logic of what we're actually saying. Just do what we want you to do. But like I say, it's gotten so extreme lately that any person that's willing to think about what's being told to them by the media, they have to realize, well, that doesn't add up. How is this an insurrection? But we've seen images of fires in these cities, and images or videos of where Antifa and different groups have taken over Portland or in Seattle. It's like, what exactly about that is not an insurrection, but then you're going to call people going into a building an insurrection? If that's an insurrection, they better be installing somebody else as a dictator or something. Like that's what a real insurrection is you are actually trying to end that system. You're trying to rebel against your government. That's not what that was. That was just a bunch of useful idiots going into the Capitol building. But they'll call it an insurrection to sell their points. I mean, it's just people. I think I'm trying to be optimistic that more people will see that and just be forced to figure that much of it out, at least. That doesn't add up. Mr. Yamabito also says, I gave up on the media even when what they share is plausible. Remember, propaganda has degrees of truth, but more manipulation. Edible lies until years one dies a slow death from rat poison. Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. That's at least a big part of what I was trying to say, is that people are going to have to basically decide, is the media trustworthy? Is the mass media, the legacy media, whatever outlets you watch, even if you look at alt media, there a lot of them are going to lie to you too. It's just, you have to kind of figure out what makes sense to you, not what you're being sold. But with television especially, the mainstream media outlets are so terrible now in terms of how far they've amped all this up, that it's just people who are, like I say, maybe apathetic to politics to start off with, will look at this and say, that makes no sense. How is that a peaceful protest? How is that an insurrection, when the peaceful protest is worse than the insurrection? Just a very simple thing. It's like, that makes no sense. How is someone stunning or brave or a good person because they deny that they have a Y chromosome? Even if, oops, sorry, I bumped my mic there. Even if you start off with the position that you don't care about what transgendered people do, you're all for it, or you don't care, it's none of your business. When they say, well, this is amazing that this person's doing this because they're denying their own biology, you have to think about this and be like, what? That doesn't make any sense. No matter what your original position is on these things, if you think about what you're being sold, it just does not add up. And I'm hoping that more people will at least see that part of it. And regardless of where they are on the political spectrum, aside from being on the far left, basically, they're going to have to realize that they're full of crap. Or maybe they won't. And they'll just, like I say, their sleep will turn into a coma and they'll never wake up out of it. And they'll just believe whatever they're told because they don't think logically, and they don't apply logical principles to whatever they've heard now and in the past. Like, they don't try to see whether it's consistent or not. It's just, they just believe whatever they're told. Kind of like the old doublethink concept. It's been a long time since I've read 1984, but it's kind of that same thing. You doublethink, well, what they told us yesterday doesn't have to be consistent with what they're telling us today. That's the only way people can stay asleep. It's just to not think about it at all in some of these cases, in my opinion. Blue Vision says, at this point, there's no fighting the socialism that's coming. All we can do is find our own pockets to survive in. I agree with that. Definitely. It's going to be very difficult, but, some of the red states might be behind. They might be better places to live in right now than California. But eventually it's probably going to overspread society until society falls apart at the seams. I agree. It doesn't look good. You could try to get away from it, but it's just going to continue to spread, I think, at this point. I don't think we can reverse anything. Let's see here. Trying to skip some of the comments that were directed to other people. What the says, how does one go about getting another to stop accepting information in passing? Well, that's tough. I would say that in most cases, people choose whether they're going to think or not. That's one of the kind of fundamental things that you can't really control with people. And we all have the potential, I think, for not thinking. Like there's always going to be, that's the easy way out. There's always going to be sort of a possibility of doing that. Even myself, there's a possibility that I'm not thinking about the facts on something. If I'm not, you have to kind of get people, I guess, to be aware that they're not doing their own thinking. I know I've kind of changed some of my strategy with that recently, just in terms of, after this last election, I basically decided, or even before the election actually took place, I basically decided that I wasn't going to argue with people anymore unless they showed me that they were willing to think about what they were saying. Some of the people in my family, for example, it's just, they're so ideological, just one way or the other. And, I kind of got into the middle of it to some extent with one of the family debates, and it was just so stupid. It was just such a waste of time. And really, it's something I should have figured out before then. But people are so polarized. It's just, you can't make them think. The only thing I would say is, don't be afraid to be an asshole. Unless you're worried about your physical safety or your job or something. If someone says, don't you think this? I think the response is, no, I don't. And then they can try to demonize you or whatever. Let's just say, for example, that it's about the coronavirus. Don't you think this is so terrible? Don't you think we should be staying at home more? What do you think about these people that don't wear a mask? All you can really do is be honest with them, I think, and say, I don't agree with this. This doesn't make sense to me because of this reason. And then they can call you names or whatever, and you can just be like, honestly, my position, I will literally tell people at this point, I'm not going to have this discussion with you until you show me that you're actually willing to think about this. That's honestly a lot of what my response would be anymore. It's like, you can't force people to think, but you can disengage from people that don't choose to think. That's really probably the only sort of advice I could give about that, is don't waste your time and energy discussing things with people, not because they have a different point of view than you. Even if you don't think you're going to agree, if they're at least thinking about it, you can have a reasonably good discussion with that person. But when they're not capable of being intellectually honest, because they're either not honest or they're not intellectual, I know that's a rude thing to say, but because they're not willing or capable of being honest and thinking for themselves, that's the only thing I would do at this point. It's like, if it got too annoying, I would just say, until you think for yourself, I'm not going to have this discussion with you. And then they can get pissed off or whatever, but that's where I personally am with that now. It's like, you can't make people think, but you can refuse to kind of go down to that level of not thinking. Mr. Yamabito says, too many useful idiots. Yep, that's a big part of what we've got going on. And then we've got some more conversation within the chat, within different people in the chat amongst each other, which is good. Let's see. Man, I am so far behind on some of these comments that... Mr. Yamabito says, I am only living in the system for my elderly parents and my autistic brothers. Yep. Sometimes you're just going to have ties like that you kind of just navigate around whatever's going on and you try to do your best. Says, if I did not have family, I would have gone the way of that not so I'm not going to say that, but yeah, I get it. You have to sort out the people that are worth it from the people that aren't, and you're going to still have ties to the system probably. The only way to get out of that completely is probably to entirely leave the country, which Yamabito says leave society. Yeah, that's kind of what you'd have to do. Blue Vision says, well, they certainly did a good job kicking us men out of society. Yep, that's been part of the plan. I don't think I need to go into that too much, but because I think you all probably know this already, to be honest, but you demonize men, especially Caucasian men, because they're the ones that are most likely going to defend Western civilization. You demoralize them and take them out of the equation, and everybody else that you have left is less likely to resist the government just saying we don't want Western values anymore. Not saying other groups of people can't resist, but it's mainly the group of people that founded your civilization. So those are the people that you demonize the most. And then you can go into all the men's issues versus, feminism and all that too. But it's the same thing. It's like, again, who's going to resist government takeover, men or women? Well, men are. So those are the people that you take down as much as you can through society. Like I said, I probably really didn't even need to go into that. I think you all pretty much know that. Barry Mansfield says, the actor-based reality is worth considering, and also the apparent link between... Well, I don't know about that link, and I don't want to use some of those words just because I don't want things to get flagged, although they probably wouldn't, and I don't monetize my channel anyway, but just look at the accusers of Kavanaugh and Weinstein. Yeah, I don't know about any connections like that, but I'm sure they exist in some cases. But I'm not going to act like I know evidence one way or the other on that stuff. Vention says, Ohio Dan, yep, the inflation we're headed into is why all these large corporations and governments are getting into Bitcoin. I'm going to make a crazy amount of money this year. I hope so, man. I hope so. I hope you prosper, and I hope that other people that are seeing the same things that you're seeing prosper. Maxwell's 1984 says the billionaires got richer. Yeah, and even if they have to take a temporary hit, it's not just about their current level of wealth, it's about their control over society as well, right? So they already have a whole bunch of wealth, but what they can do with it becomes more extreme once they control more and more of society. That's my understanding of it. Again, that might be kind of a rudimentary understanding. Like, I'm sure there are people that know more about that than I do, but that's what I see going on. I see a lot of this corona response stuff as just, we know we're destroying the middle class. We're going to pretend that it's Trump's fault, and we're going to use the virus as the mechanism to do it. I mean, along with other things, but that's what's been convenient for them. I don't necessarily think that the virus itself was a plandemic. I don't think it's necessary to believe that. They're using it as an opportunity, just like they use so many other things as an opportunity to gain control, to, possess more, a higher percentage of the wealth and control in society. Let's see, Maxwell's 1984 says, Corona-19 is the 7th coronavirus, and they never found a vaccine. Yeah. I don't think they tried very hard in the past either, but I think that's going to be one of the continued justifications that we see. I think it's worth mentioning that. You're going to see a lot of people say, well, there's this new strain of the virus. You're already seeing this. I've heard this for the past several weeks now. there's this new strain in England. There's this new strain in wherever, whatever state or district or jurisdiction or whatever, this whatever area you're looking at. Oh, it's mutated. We don't have a cure for this. We need to keep wearing masks and staying at home. I think you're going to see somewhat of an attempt to extend that. Now, the people that are in power today, the people that have control over the narrative, they may decide, well, people are so sick of this that they're not buying this, so we better back off on the whole idea of, well, there's a new strain, so you have to continue to do this forever until we get yet another vaccine. They may not go to that extent because they know people are pissed off and frustrated already. But they might too. They may feel so emboldened by the power they have, especially in the United States, that they try to use that as an excuse for continuing, to try to make people stay at home, make people, not be able to go about their daily lives as they see fit. Because once this vaccine they have now is administered, they're not going to be able to use the current iteration, the current version of the coronavirus as an excuse. So they're going to look for something else, and that could very easily be, well, there's this other strain of the virus, and we don't have a cure for that, and it's worse. And that's just, that would be a convenient way to continue to extend what they've been doing, if that's what they decide they're going to do, and if they think they can kind of pull it off without people getting so frustrated finally that they're just not going to do it anymore. I don't know, but I keep my eyes open for that. Anytime you hear about some alternate strain, some new strain of the virus, it could very, very easily be the next step of, well, we need to convince people to keep this up because we're running out of opportunities with the current narrative, and we need to add this to the story in order to justify continuing to crunch people down. I mean, I could see something like that happening. Maybe it will and maybe it won't, but Vincent says he was talking to Blue Vision and says that he could date here, or I could do a 22-year-old hottie. Yeah. Well, at that one hotel you stayed at, I noticed you had 2 beds, so that was your opportunity to take advantage of that, Vincent. You could have made her stay in the other bed once you decided that you'd had enough. I'll admit that crossed my mind when I saw that. I guess that's the way my perverted mind works, but Blue Vision says Democrat rioting and looting good, Republicans going into a building bad. That's right. That's how the media is portraying it, and it's just so blatant that they're not. I mean, there's just no attempt at actual journalism. It's just, how can we frame this in order to propagandize the masses, in order to sell people our ideas? That's what all the mainstream media is about. And I think people, like I say, some people may wake up to this and some people may not. Let's see. I think I'm kind of catching up with the comments, but I'm probably still several minutes behind here. Norman's... I'm not sure. I probably will pronounce this wrong. Norman Siwash, socialism, censorship, and loss of constitutional rights from COVID-19 will be the perfect storm for mass social pushback. Maybe. I don't know right now. People, like I say, unless people wake up to the big picture of what's going on, not just with the media lying to them, but, beyond that, even to where they realize that, this is not acceptable because of a virus that kills 2% of the people that it infects, and mainly people that are already dying. I hate to say that. Unless people finally put it together and start thinking for themselves, people are so in the dark when it comes to what's going on. And I just think, if there was going to be a pushback to this, why did Biden win? And you could argue that he didn't win legitimately, but it's just like, why did both houses of Congress switch to Democratic control? It's like, maybe there'll be a pushback to this, but I think it's too late, to be honest. I think that too many people are just consenting to all this, and just, it's not just the media that's the problem, but it's just people. Like I say, a lot of people really do. They just don't care. A lot of people are willing to trade their freedoms for the government just telling them what to do and giving them free stuff. Unfortunately, a lot of people, maybe the majority of people, have decided that that's what they want, and so they're not gonna push back. They're not gonna stand up to it. Unfortunately, we'll see what happens. But Barry Mansfield says maybe this whole era is to bring about a revival of American values because elites know that the sleeping masses need to be massively trolled for them to get it. It's one massive trolling effort from the top. Yeah. The thing is, and I've been reading a few manuscripts. Well, they're not really manuscripts. They're short books, basically, about the fall of nations, about the fall of empires and stuff like that, Reverend 20 Piece turned me on to. He showed me kind of some of the stuff that's been written by that. And, I think it's pretty convincing. We're not going back to American values. This society has been too gutted. Unfortunately, empires or societies, they tend to follow a pattern. And I would argue that you can do certain things to make things last longer, but it's kind of like a society has a certain lifespan, and once you get beyond a certain point, if you can't keep things together, you're never going to go back. I mean, you look at the people today, they don't value the same things that our ancestors did. They just, like I say, a lot of them want to be taken care of by the government, or they just want, they don't care. They don't care about improving themselves if they can. It's all about what they get out of it. It's all about me. And I'm not saying you can't prioritize yourself, but a lot of it is me in a way that doesn't even respect yourself. So I don't think that's going to happen in terms of going back to American values. In all honesty, I don't think it matters what we do. Like, even if people truly woke up to what was going on, we are just we're at such a different stage in our society that we're never going to go back to a constitutional republic. Even just within the framework of our own political and legal system, I don't think we can go back, because in a constitutional republic, only certain people have voting rights, and we have a democratic republic now. We basically turned our back on the idea of constitutional rights, and this is my opinion. Maybe a lot of you guys won't agree with that, and that's okay. But I think we've kind of turned our back on what made a constitutional republic sustainable when we decided, we'll just let everybody vote regardless of whether they have any sort of ties to the continuation of society, regardless of whether they just want free stuff, or in the case of women, you can argue about the 19th Amendment and all that, but if you're just going to let women vote, they're just going to vote for security. They're just going to vote for the majority of them, not all of them, of course, but they're just going to vote for the government taking care of them, for the government kicking the man out of the house. Like, a lot of what you see between men and women today is a result of women having the right to vote. And I'm not saying they should or shouldn't have that. I'm not even going to try to get into that argument either way, but that destroys a constitutional republic. When you allow everybody to vote who doesn't have a stake in the system, who doesn't have a stake in preserving basic things like free speech and due process and all that, when the majority of voters don't care about that anymore, you're kind of done, in my opinion. And that's one of the reasons why things can't go back to the way they were, but it's also just a big part of where we're at. Like, you can't go back to a previous stage in your society. You have to keep moving forward until it falls apart, and then whoever's left can rebuild and build something better than what fell apart. But it's very difficult and nearly impossible, I think, to go back once it reaches a certain point. I think we're definitely past that point, to be honest. Point of no return. I hate to be so negative, but that's kind of where it is, I think. Blue Vision says California is conservative outside of LA and San Francisco once you get out of the major cities. Yeah, there are probably some other... I don't know how San Diego is or Sacramento and some of the smaller cities. But the thing is, and this is what people have said about like balkanization, the problem with balkanization in the United States, at least, is that it's not one region of the country versus the other primarily. If you just look at a political map in terms of, well, look, the blue states are all on the East Coast and the West Coast, and the red states are all in the middle of the country, why don't we just split this into 3 or 4 countries? Well, it's not... Central America and Western America and the East Coast. There are major differences in culture, of course, but it's a matter of the cities either dominate a particular state or they don't. It's urban versus rural. And so if you would balkanize the country, meaning you split it up into different regions and say, well, this is a country now, you split it up into sort of different political units, what good is that going to do? You're still going to have the rural people versus the urban people. Maybe people could move from one to the other, but that's the thing about it, is that there seems to be kind of that oversimplified view of, well, California is all full of leftists, and Ohio, that went for Trump big in both of these last 2 elections, they're more conservative. No, we're really not. You go to the major city centers like Cleveland and Columbus and Cincinnati to some extent, they're full of leftists. So, that's not going to resolve the conflict. It's just going to make the conflict or cause the conflict to take a somewhat different form. But it's not a matter of, for example, Illinois. It's not a matter of, well, Illinois is so leftist. No, it's just that Chicago outvotes the rest of the state. That's basically what it is. So, it's not like, well, we'll just make our own little leftist fiefdom out of Illinois and kick them out of the rest of the region. That's not going to do anything, because it's not really about that. It's about urban versus rural. So, I don't know. I saw Stardust make a video on that and how he thought, balkanization was kind of inevitable in the United States. And I get why he thinks that. I get why a lot of people see it that way, but I don't think it would really do anything to resolve a lot of the underlying differences between rural and urban America. Urban America, where people just want to basically have the government take care of them, and rural America, where people don't want to do that. I that's oversimplified, but that's kind of what it is, and it's not going to be easily resolved. I'll just say that. Barry Mansfield says they know people will demand freedom in the end. All attempts at tyranny eventually fail. I was actually going to have that as my kind of my second subject that I was going to talk about in this video. I've gone on reading comments and responding for a long time though, but I wanted to mention that and this isn't exactly what you said, Barry, but it really leads into the second thing that I wanted to say in this video, which is there seems to be this sort of condescending, look down our noses at you view of people on the left. And I'm sure this is mostly from kind of the elites themselves, but especially leftists who they think that they're better than everybody else. They're more intellectual, they're more informed, and that's why they're leftists. They know more about, refined political systems and all this bullshit. That's just my interpretation of it. But you see this sort of attitude of looking down your noses at people on the left a lot of the time. We're headed toward this utopia, and you are deplorable if you don't agree with us. And the elites, like I say, the people that have wealth, they're controlling that narrative. They're convincing people that that's the case. But one thing they seem to miss out on is that I don't necessarily agree that you can't control people for an extended period of time. But what happens is good people find a way around what you've created in society. And what I mean by that is, eventually, if you treat the backbone of your society, the men, the people that founded your civilization, in our case, Caucasian people, primarily. And yeah, there was slavery and, all that took place. And I'm not saying that other people didn't help with the founding of Western civilization, whether they were forced to or not. But the problem is, when you take the people that your society is dependent on, usually the founding group of that civilization, or just the good people who are left in society in general, even, the women that work hard, that, don't fall for all the feminist crap, or the men of different races that value the original Western values. When you take these people and you demonize them and you tell them, no, you're not going to have your freedoms anymore. We're going to just listen and believe if someone makes an accusation against you because you're a man, or you're just racist if we disagree with you if you're white. If you divide and conquer, you might be successful using that strategy, politically speaking, for a long time. But just like with what people say with socialism, people say, well, with the problem with socialism is you run out of other people's money eventually. Most of you guys have probably heard that, the problem with socialism is you run out of other people's money to spend, and then the government goes broke and there's nothing left in society to, even pretend that you can keep it propped up after a certain point. Well, when it comes to cultural Marxism and the attributes that I've talked about that are relevant, race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, whether you're conservative in your lifestyle or not. And by that, I mean, you value your freedom, you save your money and all that stuff. When you treat those people like crap in society, those people are going to do one of three things. They're either going to physically, literally leave that society, so you no longer benefit from both their productivity, but also just the good things that they were willing to do for their community, right? The people that they would have interacted with. You're not going to have that anymore. All you're going to have left is the people that have stayed behind, who probably just want free stuff from the government and are going to treat, they're going to treat each other like crap. They're not going to help prop society up anymore. They just want those, that government support in order to be taken care of by the government. Or the second thing that good people who are left in society will do is they'll just stop being good people. They'll just say, you know what? No, I'm just going to try to be a victim too. Now, that's not a good solution. I'm not saying that at all that's what people should do in that situation. But that is what some people will do. They'll look at this and say, why work hard when I'm going to have all this money taken in taxes for people that have no problems? They could work hard, they just don't want to because they have this victim status, because they're part of the oppressed class according to the government. Why not just join them? Why not just say, well, I'm oppressed too, and try to get money that way instead? Or, like I say, if you don't want to look at it just from a money aspect, it's also just the way that you go about things. Like, you're going to stop caring about other people when you know those people are probably willing to exploit you and screw you over. And that leads into the third possibility. The third thing that a lot of good people will do, and I'm probably myself will try to be in this category. I'm not saying I'm the best example of a good person, but this is kind of probably where I'd fit the most into, is you redirect the good that you can do to other things. You don't care about your community anymore, but you focus on the people and the things that deserve to matter in your life. And you know what an example of that is? MGTOW. That's exactly what it is. That's one of the main manifestations that we see of that right now, is men that are looking at this situation in society and saying, well, I'm trying to be a good person, but I get treated like crap because I'm a man. And I've become more or less a second-class citizen in some ways because, we're just supposed to listen and believe anytime a woman makes an accusation, or my family can just be taken away from me in the family law courts. We have all these gender roles that we're supposed to live up to in terms of being providers and protectors, but we can't expect anything from a woman because that's sexist if we do. So I'm just not going to get married. I'm just not going to have kids, and I'm going to focus on the people and the things that are important. I'm going to do my best to be a good person, but I'm not going to direct the fruits of my labor into society anymore. And so when leftists look down their nose at people, and they basically have this attitude of, we're right, you're going to do what we say, you're going to work hard for little to no gain, you're going to accept being demoralized, you're going to accept being demonized based on who you are. We don't care whether you're a good person or not. You're deplorable because you voted for Trump, or you're deplorable because of your race or your gender. How dare you not support feminism? How dare you not support BLM or whatever? You're a bad person for that. Okay, you know what the good people will eventually do as they figure this out? Like I say, they'll either leave that society, they'll not be good people anymore, or they'll find a way to be a good person on their terms, and they'll say, screw society. Society doesn't have your back as a good person anyway, so why continue to prop it up? So just like a lot of your socialists talk about, or the people that know what socialism does, not your actual socialists, but your anti-socialists, they know that eventually through socialism you run out of other people's money to spend. In the same kind of way, you eventually run out of people's goodwill in cultural Marxism. I would say it's even worse in some ways because, people just decide, well, I don't give a crap, or I'm not going to stay in this society at all. You have people, for example, and I'm not trying to attribute this to him or put words in his mouth, but AVOR, or TVOR, the voice of reason. I don't know why I said AVOR. The voice of reason basically says, I want to leave Canada. This isn't my country anymore. Screw this. And you're going to see people come to that conclusion. It's like, well, if you're not valued for being a good person, you're not appreciated, especially as a man, to be honest. But even good people in general, who are trying to care about their community, and they realize that they just get exploited for it, they're going to stop doing those things. And eventually these leftists that look down their noses at your common folks, at the people that aren't good enough for them, they think that they can just keep exploiting people indefinitely. That's really, I think, what a lot of them think they'll get away with. You spread the propaganda around, you demoralize them, and you can basically, maybe enslave is a little bit too much of a dramatic word, but you can absolutely control the population. But eventually those people that are good who are left, they will stop propping up your society. And then all that you have left are users. All that you have left are people that don't give a crap about your society or about your country. And when it gets to that point, who is going to help you be productive with your society? And this is why Marxism always fails. This is, to my opinion, this kind of encompasses socialism and stuff. It fails financially, economically, but this is why all forms of Marxism will eventually fail, implemented on a wide scale. It's because, it requires good people to basically be treated like crap, and they're only going to deal with that for so long before they choose a different option. Except for maybe the really stupid good people that are left, but then you could argue about, what are they going to do for society if they're dumb enough to buy into this whole Marxist paradigm? So that's my kind of rant on that I've been thinking about as well. It's like there seems to be this implication that, well, we're just going to treat you like crap and you're just going to deal with it. And it's like, no, that's not what's going to happen in the long run. In the short run, you might get away with that. But when people finally realize that they're not going to be rewarded for being a so-called good person anymore. They're either going to quit being a good person, they're going to leave, or they're going to find a way to redirect that. They're going to be a good person on their own terms. And like I say, that's what MGTOW is. MGTOW totally fits into that category. It's about finding a way to be a good person and to develop yourself and improve your own life on your terms and for the people that deserve to be in your life and the things that are important to you, and screw everything else. Screw the usury, screw the people that want to exploit you. They don't matter anymore. And then when they come back to you and say, save our society, yeah, that's not going to happen now, is it? But there does seem to be that belief from leftists that, oh, we'll just treat the good people, the people that, care about America or whatever other country you're in the West, we'll just treat them like crap and use them forever. At some point, it gives way. At some point, you don't have enough people left who don't want to just take advantage of the system to keep the system afloat, in my opinion. And, it's gonna hasten the demise of this country and our society to think that way, to think that you can just exploit people forever. Well, no. In my opinion, I don't think it works out like that. I don't know what you guys think. I've been rambling on with that for a long time now, but let's see here. Some more talk about COVID and stuff. Norman, again, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Siwash. Way more deaths from canceled surgeries than from COVID-19. That might be true. Not sure. Kind of hard to measure that, probably. Because you can always say they died from something else, just like with COVID itself. Okay, I'm going to kind of speed through some of these because I've fallen so far behind on these comments. I need to do a better job with that. Anon Bradley says, pandemic is not planned. Look at who your healthcare field is made out of, all foreigners. We're all the white male young genius doctors. Gone without them is over. It's over, no critical thinking. Yeah, I think that that's somewhat true in terms of who's being controlled, but I don't know that that makes a difference in terms of whether they're domestic or not. I think that they just fall for the hype in a lot of cases. There's kind of a phenomenon that you see. I've noticed this with a lot of different professional groups. It's just like the dentists that tell you need to brush your teeth 5 times a day. I don't know if any of you guys have encountered those people. There are some dentists I've seen that will tell you, brush your teeth at least 3 or 4 times a day. Now, I at times have not done very well with with keeping up with my oral hygiene. I'm not going to lie. I should have done a better job in the past with that. And I know nobody wants to really hear the details about that, but, there's no reason to have to do something like that. That's dumb. No one's going to brush their teeth that often unless they're someone that suffers from a really bad obsessive compulsive disorder. But you see that within different professions, and I think the same is true for healthcare here. That's the point that I want to make, is that you see a lot of these people freak out and they think the coronavirus is the worst thing ever, but they do that with any disease. It's just they're over-focused on their profession and they can't kind of see the forest for the trees. That's the problem with a lot of this coronavirus stuff, is people don't have any experience with something like this because they don't understand history and they haven't lived through a real serious pandemic, so they think this is the worst thing ever, and that adds to a lot of hysteria. Again, I'm not saying it shouldn't be taken seriously, but it's just a lot of the reactions you see are just totally irrational, in my opinion. Stay home, save lives. Right. I mean, stay away from the nursing home and save lives. That would probably be more accurate. I know I'm being a smartass by saying that, but it just doesn't add up, like I say. I want to kind of get through some of these comments here. I've been on this for over an hour and a half now. Vincent says, Ohio Dan, laugh out loud. All the cancer treatments kind of killed my urge for that. That second bed was wasted. I'm sorry, Vention. I'm sorry that you couldn't make use of that. It's such a disappointing thing for a MGTOW, especially a MGTOW monk. It's just a real missed opportunity, I guess. It's yeah. Some people will value that. It's like they think that's you have to be able to try to do that and whatever. Not worth it. Even if you could, it's probably not worth it. See, Vincent also says, yes, the system is going to crash. I agree. I've seen this coming since 2006. That's why I got into prepping precious metals and when I got a clue, Bitcoin. This is self-defense. When you figured that out, Vincent, in 2006, was that before you bought your house? I'm just kind of curious about that because I'm wondering whether that was kind of part of your understanding of what might happen, that you could kind of turn that for a profit at some point if you realize that things were going to probably crash again. And of course you're aware of the cycles and all that, but the system itself completely crashing I think is a little bit different than the low end of the cycle. But just wondering whether that kind of buying that house was after you realized that you might be able to take advantage of that. Barry Mansfield says the former left voters will probably agree to take the chip and work as the new slaves in the smart cities. That's the left neutralized. Yeah, I don't want to know what it's going to look like when it's all said and done. I think eventually it will totally unravel, but how far we get to that, and I may do some standalone videos on that subject, like just my own kind of take on what may or may not happen, because even though this isn't sustainable, what we're seeing now in society, it's definitely not sustainable, but what will actually happen and how long it will take to completely come undone and what that will look like, it's hard to have that kind of discussion on YouTube without getting censored, first of all, but also it's really hard to imagine. I think you could come up with several different scenarios that are vastly different than one another. A lot of people will say things like we're headed for a civil war, and I don't really see that happening because conservatives don't seem to be rallying behind that idea. I mean, it's just they want to work within the system. Well, if you want to work within the system and the left is already winning, how are you going to have a civil war? Who's going to start that, and what would the goal be? So I think it's more likely that we end up with straight up Marxist communism just openly as our government system, and this may take 100 years. I don't know how long that will take. Maybe it'll only take 20 years. Who knows? Or there could be at some point just somebody basically tries to take over the whole system and declare themselves an emperor. Or, there could be many things that could happen. Like I say, it's hard to discuss it on YouTube because if you go into the details, you're probably going to get censored. But I don't know, Barry, and for everybody else, how that will look. Maxwell's 1984 says Joe Biden didn't get 80 million votes more than Obama. You know what? I think he did. Or whatever the tally was. I don't think it was 80 million more votes because there's only 300 and some million people in the United States. So that might have been his actual vote total. But you have to realize how many people were indoctrinated to vote against Trump. People will say, well, this is proof that there's all this voter fraud on a massive scale because there's no way more people voted for Biden than Obama. Well, first of all, the population's gone up. Even if you want to say it's illegal immigrants to some extent. That's possible, but the population of the country has gone up. But also, people just voted against Trump. You know, people sat on their ass, they watched CNN, and they filled out their ballot and mailed it in for Biden and all the other Democrats. That's a big part of why they wanted the media and everybody else that has those sort of interests in the political system. That's really why they wanted the mail-in voting, because the people that were more enthusiastic were more your Trump supporters. They were more likely to vote for Trump. No one was enthusiastic about Biden, but they would sit on their ass in front of their TV that had CNN on for 12 hours a day and go ahead and fill their ballot out and mail it in the next morning. That's a lot easier. I really think that's why so many people voted for Biden. They just indoctrinated people that Trump was evil and that they had to vote for Biden, and then they gave them the easiest opportunity that they could to do that. So no, it doesn't surprise me that many people voted for Biden, because of the indoctrination and how easy they made it through that mail system to, you know, not really give a crap but still vote based on what the television told you to who your television told you to cast your vote for, basically. Barry also says that's probably what the lockdowns will increasingly be used to prevent, to stop productive men leaving the country for a place where they have more rights. That's possible. That's definitely part of their goal. They want to try to keep productive people and people that will do good, you know, that want to do good for the people around them. They'll try to keep them under control because they need to have those people. And I think part of the arrogance on the left is that those people can just be controlled indefinitely no matter how poorly you treat them. But they'll always find a way. Even if some of them just decide that they want to be part of the victim class and not be a good person anymore, that still is very detrimental to your totalitarian state. If that's what you end up with, and the people that are most valuable are totally demoralized, they're going to find some other way. You know, most of them, unless they're really stupid, are not going to give people their best or society their best anymore. Fran F., who has made some good comments on my videos recently, he says, hey Dan, I agree, Barbara Tuchman's, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, it might be Tuchman's, A Distant Memoir is a good book on the Black Plague. Yeah, I think you mentioned that on one of your comments, or it might have been a different book or different publication, I don't know. I might check that out here if I remember. Vincent says, I got rid of my TV in 2005. That allowed me to wake up. Then I saw the economic cycle and invested accordingly. Loaded up on precious metals, then flipped it to my house down payment in 2012. Okay, I was thinking that you were either in the condo or it was at least well before you bought your house. But yeah, that's good that you were able to use your house as kind of a tool to increase your wealth there. I kind of wondered about that because, you know, you seem to have obviously invested a lot in the house, and, you know, you liked living there for the most part, from what I saw in your videos at least. But I guess, you know, I kind of wondered if that was part of the plan the whole time, was to make some profit off of that and kind of move on to the next step from there. Bought the house for $160K and sold it for $310. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty darn good. Even if you account for inflation and stuff, that's almost twice the value. So then I got Bitcoin. Vincent also says, then I got a clue on Bitcoin in 2015 and started stacking. Made some mistakes, so I couldn't retire in 2017. But time in the market brings wealth. Yep. You'd still be working if it weren't for your diagnosis, probably. That, I think, was kind of another thing that encouraged you to go ahead and pull the plug on that from what you've said. As far as retirement and selling the house and all that. Barry says, as the USA gets weaker, Russia will make their move, which could be a surprise. Russia wants a more socially conservative world culture. That's possible, definitely. Somebody's going to fill that power vacuum. And if it's China, they're certainly not going to be more... They might be more socially conservative, but you don't want China to be the next superpower. It looks like right now China is going to be another superpower, and Russia may be the kind of the competing power against them within the next few decades. Vincent says, Ohio Dan, if you are unaware of the fraud, then you simply haven't done your research. It's okay, you're not the only one by far. You've got to be a real conspiracy wacko to see it. Yeah, I just don't. I honestly, I kind of, again, maybe it's because of my original expectation. I think a lot of the Trump supporters thought they would win no matter what, and I was really skeptical about that to begin with. But, to me, it's like you have to show which ballots actually needed to be tossed out or which ballots weren't counted. And there just weren't that many states that were that close. I'm more of a strict kind of evidence type of person. And you might say, well, the evidence is there. Maybe it is. I don't see it. I think people were just so indoctrinated that they voted for Biden. And there didn't need to be fraud beyond that, I don't think, for the Democrats to regain that power. Not that they were ever really out of power, but to regain total power over the federal government. That's my opinion. A lot of my viewers disagree with that. That's fine. But, that's my take on it. Okay, I'm actually starting to catch up with the comments now. Barry says, I helped the Dash creator build up his discussion forum at the beginning, but didn't have the funds to buy much of the coin. That sucks. And Vincent and Barry had some good conversation there. Maxwell's 1984 says H.R. 127 is a big push to take our guns and put gun owners in a public database so they can easily find you and label you a terrorist. Yeah, I mean, they're already doing that with the red flag laws to a large extent. So, yeah, it's only going to be if you fit in certain groups at first, probably. It's like, oh, you have to be a racist, or you have to say things against women. Something like that could easily be sort of what's used. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, the pretext for it, but they're not going to all of a sudden say, we're going to take your guns away. They're going to try to come up with some stupid reason. They'll probably wait till there's another shooting or supposed shooting, and then they'll go ahead and since the Democrats have control of the government, they'll use that as a catalyst. That's what they like to do, whatever's politically convenient. So I don't know what that will look like. I might research. Was it House Bill 127 or House Regulation? I don't know what the HR stands for in that particular sentence, but yeah, you'll see more of that. It's a matter of, well, we're going to take your rights away because you're bad, and you're bad because you voted for Trump, or you're bad because you're a man, or you're bad because of your certain race. That's what you're going to see. That kind of thing, unfortunately. Vincent says, yes, I do love being a mechanic, but I had to give it up. Yeah, when you got diagnosed. Yeah. Well, at least you're not having to dig trucks out of the winter weather and that kind of stuff like you did a couple years ago, where I remember you saying you got your ass kicked pretty good during the winter weather. At least you don't have to worry about that crap this year. Stay away from it. Anon Bradley says Trump brought in communism, Biden will bring in fascism. Yeah, maybe. My thing about fascism is that people are misusing that term left and right. Like, I guess there's a definition for fascism that just says, supporting some sort of totalitarian, like it's some sort of generic definition that doesn't really make sense, but some sort of, racial thing, which is not even necessary for fascism. Fascism is just basically, and I'm not trying to explain this for no reason. I don't need to go into that many details, but it's basically just, the idea of the state and the nation state being the most important entity in your society. And maybe you'll have a resurgence that heads in that direction, but most of what you see on the right is not really fascism at all. It's just what the left is calling fascism. So I don't know that they're going to be in a, maybe some more people will be drawn toward that, but it's just going to continue to be socially unacceptable. But being a communist will be acceptable because of the role of the media playing, the role the media plays and all that. Vengeance says, you didn't see the news stories of the Dems kicking the Republican vote monitors out of the buildings. The only reason for that is so they could perpetuate their fraud. Yeah, I did see some of that, but my question is, how many places did that really happen in? And I'm not saying that it couldn't have won the election, but it would take a massive number of votes to, other than in Georgia. You could have said that that would have made a difference in Georgia, but most of the other states were not that close, like Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania and such. So I think you have to kind of be specific of where that took place and how many votes that could have switched around. And again, I think a lot of my viewers disagree with that, but that's my take on it. I think that a lot of people on the Trump side, blue pill people on the Trump side, not you guys per se, but most of the people that are just ideologues and they thought that Trump could save the country and all that kind of stuff, a lot of them just couldn't believe that Trump lost. And I think that they're the ones that basically say, oh, Trump really won. It's like, you have to specifically show which votes were changed. I'm not saying it's impossible, and we can't really know for sure, but I'm pretty skeptical about that. I think that it's mostly just people are that stupid in this country at this point that they would vote for a ticket like Biden and Harris. People are so indoctrinated that, and you, like I said, you make it easy for them so that they can just sit on their ass in front of CNN and fill out their ballot. That's what a lot of people will do, unfortunately. So it doesn't surprise me that Trump lost, because I think our country is basically lost. Like and again, maybe that's why I'm skeptical on the fraud to begin with, is because I had that preconception, but that really is my take on that. Maxwell's 1984, HR means House Resolution. Thank you for that. That's something I should know. Thank you, political science classes, for for me not knowing that. That's something I should definitely have known, but that's all right. Thank you for writing that out. Vengeance says, Ohio Dan, where there's smoke, there is fire. The fraud was widespread. At this point, it doesn't matter what you think. That's absolutely true. It doesn't matter what I think. It's over, and Biden's the president for however long the Democratic Party wants to keep him around. I wonder, if anybody's betting on, and this is kind of morbid, but whether he'll finish his term or not. I just don't see Biden most likely finishing his term. And I explained this in another live stream, and I'm going to wrap this up pretty soon, I think. If anybody wants to ask me questions or anything or make comments, I'm probably only going to be on here for another five minutes or so, probably. But the thing about Harris is that she is so much better of a representative than Biden is for what the Democratic Party is trying to do. The Democratic Party is all about, like I said, they've adopted Marxism. They've adopted the idea of you need to fit into a certain group or you're not a good person. social justice, basically. They don't care about the facts, right? Just like anytime there's a shooting between a cop that's white and a black person, there's no evaluation of the facts of, well, okay, in this case, the black person was defenseless and this shouldn't have happened. But in this other case, the cop had no choice but to defend himself. You don't see that at all. It's just all about what racial group, what gender, what sexual orientation, what religion, what sort of lifestyle you fit into. And if you fit into the one that we don't approve of, you're bad. And so Biden is an old white guy. I don't see too many people pointing out this part of it. It's like they want to focus on Biden's health. They want to focus on whether Biden still has his senses and his physical health. But honestly, Harris is multiracial. She's female. She's very liberal. She's far out there. That's exactly what the Democratic Party wants to represent them, is someone like Harris. And so, honestly, I don't think things are going to get better, of course, under either one of them. But I don't see Biden sticking around for that reason either. Like, they're going to look for something. They may even impeach his ass at some point. I kind of doubt it, because they'd rather do something that's not as controversial. But they're going to have to, maybe Biden will be president for 4 years, and then Biden just won't run again, and then Harris will run and be president for 8 years. That's like a nightmare scenario, I know. I hate to be that negative about it, but it seems like something like that could be in place too, if Biden can make it for the 4 years. I don't know. I missed MGTOW Cowboy on here. Hello, boys. Cheers from Chicago. It's 4 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah, that's coming down our way, too. That cool air is going to work its way. It's already cold, but Ohio's supposed to get that pretty soon, too. Mr. Yamabito says, do you think Biden's presidency is going to be an Obama 2.0, meaning he isn't going to do squat? No, I think that with the Democratic control, they're going to try to further their agenda more. Obama actually did a lot of things that you could look into it and stuff like that, but I kind of think that all rhetoric and stupid policies, yeah, but I think they're going to be more agenda based probably under Biden for as long as he's president, and definitely if Harris becomes president. Fran F says, do you have thoughts about early retirement? No, right now I have health problems that I'm trying to kind of just basically get under better control. So that's more of my focus in terms of the long run right now over anything, early retirement. I want to get back to where, I can function reliably and stuff on a consistent basis. But that's another topic, I guess. Maxwell's 1984, Bo Jiden signed in trans woman versus real woman in sports. Yeah, again, that's part of the agenda. You deserve special status and consideration if you fit into the victim groups, and unfortunately, I think LGBTQ used to have reasonable goals, but now it's just, we want this special status from the government. It's just like everything else with this kind of Marxist narrative. Vincent MGTOW says, Ohio Dan, they made society so hostile. I think I missed one of your other comments, Vincent. You said he's not my president. Nothing out of D.C. is valid now. Only follow their rules if it's enforced. And when no one is looking, I'll do as I wish. Yeah, I get it. I saw the video that you made about that. That's kind of what I was talking about with what good people will do. Good people, such as yourself, are going to just stop caring about the society. If it no longer has their interests in mind, then they're going to find a way to redirect what they do that's positive, that's good, into other things, and they're not going to just allow themselves to be exploited. The people that have sense and see what's going on aren't going to continue to do that indefinitely. Vincent also says, Ohio Dan, they made society so hostile that I no longer feel as though I'm part of society. I'm separate from me now, so I won't support it. Only my MGTOW brothers matter now. Yeah, I understand what you're saying, man. I do. I get that. I think I'm going to go ahead and end the stream now. I kind of need to get a good drink of water, I think, at this point. And anybody that wants to leave comments in the comments bar, hopefully that functions the way it's supposed to. But I appreciate the stream. I really appreciate all the comments. I've never had that many comments on a stream. So thank you guys for your participation, and hope you guys have a good weekend. And a lot of what I talked about here was kind of probably overly negative, but that's just a lot of what's been going on my mind recently, and I haven't made a video for a really long time. So hope you guys have a good night, and I'll do something like this soon. I really want to record several standalone videos and kind of have that to edit over time as well. So you'll probably see more of those videos first before I do another live stream. Mr. Yamabito says we are all going to be a kind of League of Shadows. Vengeance says, thanks for the stream, brother. Thank you guys. Thanks for participating in the conversation. Like I say, I'm sorry there was kind of a dark tone to most of it, but that is just what it is. It's kind of hard to be optimistic about how things are now. Aside from what I said, you know, maybe more people will go ahead and become more aware that the media is lying to them at least. But, you know, maybe that in itself is a little bit too optimistic, whether people put that together or not. So again, thank you guys for the stream and for your participation. Hope things go well in Mexico, Vention. Hope things go well in California for Blue Vision and some of the others. And like I say, I hope you guys enjoyed the chat and enjoyed the stream. Have a good night.